did you think? I think I might have to hold it. What did you think about the documentary? Did you like it?
Very good.
I first want to express my gratitude to Kathy for inviting us here, and her husband, and all of you for coming to learn a little bit more about my husband, Lavoy. I also want to express my gratitude to Mark Herr and his wife Pam for doing and producing this documentary series. There are 4 episodes. There are 4 more hours because episode 4 is 2 hours long. This story is an epic story. There is so much to tell, so much information that we could not put it in 1 hour, as you can see. And it was really important to me and my family to be able to make sure that my husband was represented fairly and honestly. And what better way to do that in the beginning, to introduce you to him by him talking for himself. He left me with over 9 hours of YouTube videos. What a blessing. You know, I didn't understand why he had to make those YouTube videos at the time. He just felt he had to document. He wanted to reach out to the American people. He wanted you to know the truth. And now we're able to use those videos. And he is able to speak for himself. And you, the American people, are the jurors. You get to decide if my husband was a domestic terrorist, a racist, and all of those other labels that the media so conveniently lynched him with. My husband was a good man. He was a man of God. He was a family man. He put me and our kids above everything else. I was so grateful to have a husband who came home every night and wanted to be home every night with his children. He was actively engaged in their lives and teaching them the principles of liberty, of freedom. He taught from the scriptures because that is where liberty comes from. It comes from our God. Agency, freedom come from God. And he taught our children that, and I am grateful that I have such great kids. Oh my goodness, what great adults they are. There's so much I want to say, but I want to kind of lighten it just a little bit because this is such a serious film, and I want to share with you a story that brings me much joy to remember. It's the story about how I met my husband, Lavoy. It was back in 1992, and we were both single, and we were attending a church dance in St. George, Utah. And it was back when line dancing was really popular. And all of us girls were on the floor doing the line dancing, and it was, you know, typical. You saw all of us out there, and all the guys were sitting in the chairs or they were holding up the walls, right? Isn't that typical, girls? Yeah, well, that's what was happening at this particular dance. And in walks this gorgeous cowboy. And Kathy and I were talking earlier about gorgeous cowboys, and she was talking about hers, and I said, oh, but I have one too. And in walks this gorgeous cowboy, and he's walking along the side, and then he walks in front, and he sits up on the stage, and he's just watching us girls dance. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I hope he asked me to dance. One of the girls got tired of doing the line dancing alone, so she formed, put all of us girls in a great big circle to do the barn dance. I don't know if any of you have done the barn dance, but she put us in a circle, and then she put a young man in front of each one of us. And Lavoy happened to be standing in front of the girl right next to me on my right. And I thought, oh my heck, he's never going to make it all the way around to me by the time the song ends. I'm going to miss out. But God had something else in mind, because when the song ended, he was standing right in front of me. The song ended, and that was but it gave him an opportunity to ask me to dance the next dance, and so we did. It was a slow dance. And I didn't want him to get away just yet. So I was brave, and I asked him to dance, but it was a fast dance. And he said to me, I don't dance fast dances. I have no rhythm. And I said, come on, you're just being chicken. And he says, no, really, I have no rhythm. He says, but I'll tell you what, if you can tell me how many kids I have, I'll dance this next dance with you. And I thought to myself, I don't even know your name. How am I going to guess how many kids you have? But again, God had something else in mind, because I said 6. And he said, that's right. And I went, oh my gosh, you have 6 kids? That's a lot of kids. Well, he was a man of his word, and he did dance with me, and oh my goodness, he had no rhythm. It was terrible. It was so bad. You know, it was bad. It was really bad. And we giggled, and we laughed, and made fun of him. And afterwards, we went up and sat on the stage and talked for a little bit until some other young man asked me to dance, and off I was for the rest of the night. And I was kind of sad that this cute cowboy, didn't ask me to dance again. I thought, dang. But when we were putting away all the chairs and cleaning up the dance, he came up to me and he said, hey, Jeanette, would you give me a ride to my truck? I had a flat tire tonight. And I went, a flat tire? And he said, yeah. Well, I was hoping he wasn't giving me a line, but he wasn't. He really had a flat tire, and I gave him that ride. And 2 weeks later, we were married. It was a very short engagement. He did have 6 children, and I had 3. And so that was 9 children under the age of 9. And so we were pretty busy parents. And then Tian, who you met in the film, oh, this is going to be fun. I use my hands to talk. I'm sorry. Well, Tian, who you met in the film, she is our number 10th child, and she is considered the glue, and she belongs to everybody, and she's just a joy, as all of them are. And we did therapeutic foster care for teenage boys for over 18 years, and we adopted 2 of those young men. And so that brings us to 12. And so we're a yours, mine, ours, and theirs family. And I'm a grandma of 28, and I have 4 coming, 2 this month and 2 in January, so I'll be at 32 grandkids. I know. I have crocheted a little Afghan for each child for their blessing, and I'm going, I don't know if I have time to do 4 right now. Oh my goodness, I don't. I really don't have time, but I'm going to try to get that done. I don't know, it might be late. But it is a joy to be and have such a large family, and to have such wonderful children that are trying to do the right thing and to be great parents. You know, I was counting them up, and I was trying to see how many boys I have and how many granddaughters I have, and the boys are winning out right now. And then I was figuring out, oh my goodness, you know, I only have 5 grandchildren that are over the age of 6. All the rest are 6 and under. So they are taking this multiply and replenish very seriously. And they're busy people taking care of those kids and homeschooling these kids, because none of my children want to have their kids in school. They want to be the ones to teach their own children and help them develop their minds, and not have them being brainwashed by someone else's theories and ideas. And I'm really grateful for that. There's so many things that I could talk about, and I will answer any and all of your questions. I want to just say this. This documentary series is something our family wanted to have done. It is a story about my husband and his role, his life, and how he ended up murdered. It's not about anything else. And all of the subjects, you know, all of the different things that you see that he lived through are the things he lived through. And I guess you got to hear that he is not anti-government, and he's not an anarchist, because he said it himself. I had the opportunity to go to court this past summer, just before my youngest daughter, Tian, got married. She just got married in August, and I got home 3 days before the wedding. Oh, did I have a lot of work to do. But I spent 4 weeks up in Oregon, attending the trial of the FBI agent Astorita, who was indicted by the grand jury for 3 counts of lying and 2 counts of obstruction of justice in reference to my husband's case. It was so enlightening to sit there in that courtroom for that time, and it was something I had to do. I had to be there. I had to face those men who shot and killed my husband. I had to be there. I had to let them see my face and know that I was a human being, and that my husband was a human being, and he had a family. I had to do that, and I would do it again, and probably will be doing it again. But I sat there each and every day, and the first day we were left in the hallway. The judge wouldn't allow us in the courtroom while they were questioning and seating and selecting the jurors. And that is supposed to be a public event. And we knew we were in trouble when that happened. And the next day, he finally let us in, but by that time the jurors had already been seated. And we knew that we were up against a wall, and it is Oregon after all. And sitting there, the judge opens by giving his opening remarks to the jurors. And he's talking to them and he's saying, "Now I need you to remember that Lavoy Finicum was considered armed and dangerous, and that his killing was considered justified." And he goes on and on and on about Lavoy Finicum and the behavior and what they were doing at Malheur. And then he turns to the jurors and he says, "But this trial is not about Lavoy Finicum. This trial is about Officer Astorita. And you need to remember that, jurors." And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, then why are you talking about my husband to begin with? Why bring up his name? Why talk about Lavoy Finicum if you're not trying to influence the jurors' thought process? It goes on from there when the prosecution, who is FBI, and the defense is FBI. So you're in a federal court with the FBI on one side and the FBI on the other. And the prosecution is then asking each witness as they come and stand up, sit down on the stand, "Did you consider Lavoy Finicum to be armed and dangerous? Did you consider Lavoy Finicum to be armed and dangerous?" Over and over and over again. "And why did you consider him? Were you afraid? What did he do to make you afraid?" And they're going on and on and on with the questioning in reference to my husband. Again, not about the officer Astorita, who has been indicted and is there on trial, but about Lavoy Finicum. They make the entire trial about my husband, Lavoy. But they go on and they present evidence because they've got to try to clear this agent. And the defense is pretty much quiet throughout the whole trial process while the prosecution is putting on their case. And the evidence starts coming out. And it's very interesting because we never knew some of these things that are coming out. Like, for instance, at the first stop, they pull over Lavoy. And the FBI agent that's in charge of the very first stop is testifying that Lavoy Finicum and Ryan Payne are in compliance with the orders that he is giving them. Now, the key word here is in compliance. The officer is shouting orders, and they are complying. They're putting their hands out. They're doing what they're being asked to do. So all this rhetoric in the press about how they weren't following what the orders given to them is a bunch of hooey, because the agent testifies to the fact that they were in compliance. But then officer number 2 from the Oregon State Police Department fires a non-lethal round at the truck while they're in compliance. And then it's testified to by that same FBI agent that that's what escalated the entire situation. He then turns to the officer and he says, "What the F did you just do? Why did you shoot?" At that time, you see Shauna Cox's camera go on in the inside of the car, and she's filming the inside. And all the transaction, all the conversations you can hear them talking, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do now? Shall we go see the sheriff?" They're shouting to, "Who are you?" Because they haven't even identified themselves. The police haven't identified themselves. They don't even know who they're dealing with. You see, there was no warrants. No traffic violation had happened. Nothing. And so Lavoie is saying, I'm going to go to the sheriff in the next town. You can follow me there, you can arrest me there. And that's what they end up choosing to do. And they start to head out for the sheriff in the next county whom they can trust. And if you watch the film, you watch my husband has a pattern. He involves his law enforcement in the things that he's doing. He is talking to a sheriff in our county. He's watching Cliven talk to his sheriff in his county. He is going to law enforcement who he trusts, because that is what they're there for. The sheriff is there. They're our last line of defense. He knew that if he could get to the next county and see sheriff there, that maybe he would stand a chance, because what just happened? They were in compliance and they were shot at. Did he trust that law enforcement? Did he believe that he would be safe? No, I don't believe he did. Lavoie never liked bullies. And so he leads to the next county, to where the sheriff is, where they feel that they can be protected. So he's not fleeing from law enforcement, he's fleeing to law enforcement in whom he trusts. And what happens next? It's testified to that the Oregon State Police Officer number 2 then radios ahead to the kill stop to Officer number 1 and says, we're going to have to kill Finicum. Now, what did my husband do that would warrant them radioing ahead and saying, we're going to have to kill Finicum? No warrant, in compliance, heading to safety, no weapons drawn, no fire shot from inside the truck to anyone. Nobody threatened anyone. And so he rounds the curve and he sees the roadblock at that point, and that's when Officer 1 fires 3 shots into the front of the truck. And then he curves into the snow, and that's when Officer FBI Agent Astorita fires 2 shots at my husband as he's simultaneously exiting the truck with his hands in the air, a universal sign of surrender. And he's being fired upon again, and his hands were empty in the air. What even astounds me even more is that Officer number 2 was so hell-bent at the first stop to fire and escalate the whole incident, makes it to the kill stop in time to put a bullet in my husband's back, along with Officer number 1. At that point, we start to hear testimony about trajectory and what, they show all the films, and you need to understand that there are 2 planes, 2 FBI planes filming everything that's going on at different altitudes. It's not a drone, they're planes, and they're filming everything. And you see, first, they continue to shoot at the vehicle for quite some time. Non-lethal rounds. You see, the non-lethal rounds you don't have to account for. They only have to account for the live rounds. But I don't know how many they emptied out onto that truck, but it went on for quite some time. So it wasn't for 25 minutes until the first FBI medic went to check my husband to see if he was alive, and then placed all this stuff on his chest to see if he had a pulse and a heartbeat. And that, when he testified to checking my husband, that's the first one of the questions that were asked was, did you see a weapon on Mr. Finicum? And the answer was no. No weapon. Yet he opened his shirt, coat, tested him. And then he swarmed with FBI agents, and they turn him over and they hog tie him, and he's dead. And they hog tie him and they leave him face down in the snow, and they throw his hat off. And then you see agents walking back and forth from the truck to the body, back and forth multiple times. You see agents walking around the whole scene, and they've got their flashlights on the end of their rifles, and they're searching the ground, and they're picking up shells, and they're picking up other things, and they're searching underneath the trucks, and they're walking to and from the body again, taking things in the truck, out of the truck and into the truck. You see, the plane video is like 4K in the courtroom, but the video that they released online is really fuzzy and blurry. It's hard to tell what's going on, and I think that they did that by design. So then they could give you the narrative that they want you to believe while you're watching a fuzzy video. But we could see what we could see in that courtroom during that trial. The experts then began to testify of the direction of the bullets that were coming, that were in question, because you see, Oregon State Police did follow protocol in the sense that they admitted that they had fired their weapons. The protocol for that was to stay where you were until your buddy officer came and then took your weapon, and they were removed from the scene. The officers left the scene. So those two officers were not there throughout that rest of the evening. But the FBI agent who had fired those two shots lied multiple times. It wasn't until the independent investigation that it was just discovered that there were two unaccounted for shots, because they were able to sync Shauna's video with the FBI video, and they could hear additional shots being fired that had not been accounted for. And that's when the experts went into starting to do the trajectory, the cone, to see which officer was where. They did a computer animated analysis, and you could tell exactly which officer it was. But when he got up on the stand to testify, he said that he didn't remember firing his weapon that day. He didn't remember. He could have, but he didn't remember. And this is a member of the elite FBI team, the HRT team from DC, like the SEAL team of the FBI. And then two of his teammates got on the stand and said, you know, I don't remember seeing Astorita shoot his weapon, and you know, it could have been me. I could have fired those shots, but I don't remember. Two of the officers did that. So you see, the jurors had no choice but to come back with a not guilty verdict, because there was reasonable doubt. And when questioned by the press afterwards, the jurors said that they knew someone was lying, but they didn't know who. Now in October, there was an AP report released saying that the FBI is going to do an independent investigation into the lack of candor during that trial. And I thought, yeah, we all know that they were lying. And I thought for a minute, because I don't know the law that well, but I'm learning. And I called my attorney and I said, hey, this is good news, right? They're going to do an independent investigation. This is good. He says, well, Jeanette, yeah, they'll do the investigation, but they're not obligated to tell you anything, the public. They're not obligated to give a report. They don't have to tell you what they do to the officers. They don't have to tell you anything. They don't even have to fire him. So it was just a report, a hollow report. And you know, when all of this was going on at Malheur, and Shauna Cox and the different members that were there were trying to talk to us about the uranium and about the water rights and about how Obama and the Clintons were involved in this, and how, you know, I'm a housewife. I'm not politically active at this point in my life, and I'm thinking, this is just too far for me to think. You know, it's too far-fetched. I can't wrap my head around it, and most everybody in the country were looking at all of us like we had tinfoil hats on, right? That we didn't know what we were talking about. But as time has gone on, have you noticed what the news cycle has done? Where's James Comey? He was head of FBI. He's one of the ones that gave the orders to send that elite team out to kill my husband. Loretta Lynch, how about her? She was Attorney General at the time, that counseled with Obama in order to allow Comey to go do what he did. Look where they're at now. Look at the FBI. Look at the firings. Look at how much lawlessness is going on. That is one thing that we need to, one of my goals is to see reform in policy and in training. I know there's good men and women that serve in our FBI and in our police agencies throughout this country. I know that. But we have to hold the ones that aren't good accountable. And at this point, the training is off. The policies are off. When they can view each and every one of us in this room as a domestic terrorist, anyone who intends to coerce, that's all of us. That word anyone that appears to intend to coerce, all you have to do is appear and then intend. That's pretty broad. We have to do something about that. We have to do something about that. Now, something I hadn't mentioned yet about the kill stop is that scene was unsecured for 9 hours. 9 hours, those officers did whatever they wanted during that scene. No one put the yellow tape up until the ME arrived 9 hours later. And that is the first time that it is reported that there was a gun on my husband 9 hours later. So I have reasonable doubt. I happen to know that my husband didn't just put a weapon in his pocket per practice. That's not how he handled his weapons. He always had a shoulder holster or a hip holster or a scabbard that he attached to his horse. He didn't just do that. I do know that he used to put his weapon, when he didn't have a holster, he would put it, because he had a concealed carry, he was always perfectly legal, and he would put it on the dash in between the Navajo blanket on the dash of his truck. And we would go out to the ranch and it'd always be there. We always knew there was one there. And in the evidence log taken that night, there was evidence taken of a box of 9mm bullets in between the fold of the Navajo blanket. So it is my belief that the gun was there next to the box of bullets. And the officers realized that he was unarmed, and they found the gun in his truck because you could see them walking back and forth. And they put it on him. The pocket was torn, and the gun was in backwards. So they probably struggled to get it in there and rip the pocket. That's my theory. That's what I'm going to try to prove. But there's so many things. One of the FBI instructors testified for the prosecution. He was a 40-year FBI instructor. And he testified to the fact that there were multiple protocols that had been broken on this particular scene. Multiple. And he went over the different protocols that the FBI had violated. So I have a really strong case for wrongful death against the FBI, the federal government, and against Harney County and Oregon State Police. I am going to go forward. I'm looking forward to a jury trial. I want the American people to hear the truth. Our family deserves to have a trial. My husband deserves to have due process. We each should fight for our due process. We are innocent until proven guilty in this country. We cannot allow them to continue this path, because right now you're guilty until proven innocent. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm fighting for. And thank you for coming. I hope that you will have us back for episode 2. And episode 3 and episode 4. Maybe we can do a double feature if you're up for a couple hours at a time. But I am open for questions if anybody has any. Yes, sir.
You mentioned one and number 2. Are they unknown, trying to be anonymous, or are you protecting yourself by anonymous?
No, I'm not protecting myself. I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I know I come from a place of, I'm honest, and I believe in truth, and so I don't fear anything that way.
There's nothing wrong with protecting yourself.
No, but officer number 1, officer number 2, and BM, they were referred to that in court because they were afraid for their life, if their names would be known. And because they are, officer 1 and officer 2 are the killers. And BM is the FBI supervisor over the team that was on that site at that time. Now, it was kind of funny, but during the trial, the prosecution slipped and said their names by accident. So we all know who they are, but I'm not going to be irresponsible and repeat them. Yes?
As a law enforcement culture, do you think that we're way behind on keeping them informed that you're presumed innocent until proven guilty? I mean, it seems like a lot of things could be prevented if that officer first thinks that guy's innocent before he even has anything to do with it. I mean, as a culture, do you think our law enforcement is looking at everybody as being guilty?
Yes. Yes, I do. I think they see us, they're being trained to see us as the enemy, in my mind, in my belief. And the evidence is showing that, especially with the lexicon, the definition, how broad it is, and the labeling, the label lynching that goes on in the press, which then gets transferred into the system and then goes into the regional, what are those called, Mark? Regional fusion centers, where all of the law enforcement from all different branches of government get their information. So yes, I believe that they are being, I believe they're being brainwashed into thinking those things and believing those things. And during the Oregon incident, they were showing films, and they had falsified, we know this now that they were falsified, but at the time, we didn't know they were falsified threat assessments. Dan Love, head of BLM law enforcement, who had been trying to get the Bundys for many years and had been, I think, a terror in the West. He was an awful, evil man. He's responsible for multiple deaths and a couple of suicides. So this officer falsified the threat assessment because he was so hell-bent on getting the Bundys. He wanted them in jail. And so he sent this threat assessment to Oregon, to Greg Bretzing, the head of FBI on the Western Division. And they were good friends. They had worked together a lot. And what came out in court from, I'll back up. Larry Wooten is a BLM law enforcement investigator tasked with investigating the BLM law enforcement. And he came up with all this evidence, and he turned it in his superiors, but they just kind of brushed it under the rug. And he knew that those Bundys were not going to get out of jail if that evidence didn't come forward. And so he became a whistleblower and put out a 14-page report, and you can find it online yourself. But with that evidence that came out there and other evidence that the Bundys found within the discovery, they were able to submit 7 Brady violations to the judge, 5 of which she had to rule on, which then forced the case to be dismissed with prejudice. And part of those Brady violations were the very falsified documents that were sent. He had taken a threat assessment that said that the Bundys were not harmful and would not, engage in firing. And he took that and twisted it and then added my husband, and my husband ended up becoming the #1 threat there in the Oregon thing. And that's just mind-blowing to me that my husband was listed like that. Some of the other things, the prosecution, the FBI, and the BLM law enforcement were all in cahoots, all doing the illegal activities trying to bring the Bundys down. Yes, ma'am?
Do you keep in contact with the Young family, and how are they doing the opportunity to go to the market?
I've reached out a couple of times, but I think that they're just wanting time to themselves, and it's my understanding that there are conditions on their release, and I don't think affiliating with people that were involved with the Oregon stand is what, I don't think they've been advised to do that. So no, I haven't had much contact, but I wish them the best, and I'm grateful that they're home, and I'm grateful the president released them. It's a very good thing. Yes?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, how's your ranch doing these days? And secondly, is BLM still doing the land grabbing that they were back then? Has it slowed down at all?
No, I don't think that's slowed down, and I think it's all over the country. BLM on the west, of course, but the land grab is everywhere, and we don't hear about it. And this is one thing I learned early on. When I started traveling in 2016, I remember going to Montana, and I remember meeting a private citizen, Joe Robertson, but he was a veteran, 78-year-old veteran. And he had water on his personal property, and he was fighting the courts in the court system to not have to destroy that pond. They were trying to force him to destroy the pond, and he ended up getting an 18-month sentence in jail. And and he had to serve time, and he is now out. But that's what made my eyes were so opened at that point that this is happening to everyone, everywhere. I met the Dan sisters, I heard about the Hages, they're fighting, and Joe Robertson had been fighting that particular battle for 10 years. Do we hear about it in the press? No, that is by design, that you do not hear what's happening from this county to the next, from one state to the next, because if we knew that this was happening to ordinary citizens fighting for their personal property rights or fighting for their individual rights, we would be a little more engaged. But we're divided, we're uninformed, and we're misled, right? And we're busy people raising our families and trying to work and earn a living for ourselves. So all of these things play against us, right? So the BLM, I'll go back to that other question you had. The scenario that my husband set out in the documentary here with the water issue with our ranch is still happening to me. And I'm forced to have to fight the BLM on this legal issue, as well as the wrongful death, as well as liable suits. I have 2 liable suits currently going on, one with sheriff in Washington for labeling me racist, KKK member, and putting me and trying to group me into that and calling my husband a racist KKK member. I'm not going to stand for that. I'm not going to be labeled and not hold them accountable. But the water issue is real for me. They're trying to take, I own all the grass, and I own 50% of the spring on this particular allotment. What they're saying is, because they're only allotting me, or they're only permitting me to have my cows on there from October 15th to May 15th, that I only own 50% of 7 months. No. I own 50% of 12 months. I own it all year long. Because there could be a time that they would reevaluate my allotment and give me more time to graze my cattle, or less time. Will I continue to lose my water rights as the months decrease? No. And if we don't stand up and fight for our water rights, because I'm watching that too, that is a similar fight across this country. Whether you're a well owner and they want to put a meter on it, or whether you're collecting rainwater and they don't want to let you do that. Water is an issue across the United States. And so I'm going to be fighting that issue as well. So, yes, sir.
Is the identity of the or the police officer who said verbally we've got to know known?
Yes, I know his name. It's officer number 2, but that's all I'm going to say. I know that they printed names because it was slips in the courtroom, and people did put it out there on the internet, but I'm not going to be the one doing that. Yes, sir.
What is the logic in them trying to tell you you only have 50% rights for 7 months instead of 12? Where does that come from?
I don't know why they think the way they think. It's about control. It's about taking whatever they think they can take. And they really feel that they're entitled to it, They really do. And they want to be able to have all the water. They want to be able to eliminate ranching out in that area altogether. So if they continue to take my water and I have less and less water, I have less and less cows I can put out there. Pretty soon, you can't make a living, and you're done, right? I don't know how many ranchers are in this room, but I see some hats. And so, am I not right? If you don't have water, you're dead, right? And so that's their objective.
I believe that. I was just wondering if there's why they hung up at 7 instead of 4, 6, or 8, if they're just curious.
Because my allotment allows me to have my cows there for 7 months, and until they change that, You know, which I see that they could do that anytime too, right? They could change that anytime.
Is this just a land that they think they own? I realize it's not constitutional, but I'm assuming you own some land personally, and then you have some kind of a grazing field to use land next to you, or what?
I purchased this grass and water from a private individual who purchased it from another private individual who then established it way back. Okay? This is considered private property. I don't own the dirt. This is a multi-use piece of property, so the hunter can still hunt, the logger can still log, the miner can mine, the camper can camp, and I can put my cows on there to eat my grass and my water. And so, I think what they would like to see happen is the elimination of all private grass and water ownership. So it can go into a national park. And then there's no cows out there.
I think the ideally like it just close that land, period, so none of them can step forward.
Well, that is happening in parts of this country. Washington in particular, you have a lot of wilderness areas up there that people can't go in. And the wolves are being reintroduced, and they're eating up everything. Yes?
Doesn't the states have the deed for all of the government land?
You know, that is a technical question, but I don't think so. Because the states at this point in the West don't have a lot of say about what's going on.
Well,
If they should, that's my belief. But.
no, that's what I followed you guys from when this first started. And I watched your husband on his YouTube videos and stuff. And originally it was against the law for the government to own land. Am I right?
Right.
So then that's where I gathered from a couple lawyers that the states hold the deed to the government land. The government controls it. So why can't the states take it over?
I don't know. Do we have anybody that is actively engaged in helping to persuade our elected officials into raising these questions and start some legislative process? Because that's the way I think it needs to go. We need to use the system the founders set up, and we, the people, are the caretakers of this system. And we have been asleep, or we've been busy, and we've been distracted, and we've been angry, and we're not doing what we should be doing. And this is my way of doing what I can. And I know that everybody has their way that they can contribute, but we really as a whole have been quite asleep at the wheel. And in the meantime, the chess players have taken over the country, and we're down here playing chess, being distracted with gay rights and bathrooms and yada, yada, yada. And we're fighting all these battles that are, insignificant, while really we've got the chess players taking everything away, and our rights, our liberties.
And I don't think people really get to know the people that they elect.
And if we did, this is part of Mark's training, actually. Mark's training, if you go to his class, he teaches you the civics, and he teaches how he empowers you to be able to do that, because that's part of the training exercises, is to get to know your elected officials and to become someone of influence in their life and in legislating.
Yeah.
Yes?
I'd like to try to address the action being taken to try to rectify the land that the federal government is not recognizing belonging to a state when it becomes a state, and that is transfer of public lands. Many of the western states, west of Mississippi, that cheated out their equal footing by the federal government denying that transfer. When a state becomes a state, every square inch within that boundary should belong to the state, minus already established federal monuments in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 exceptions, arsenals, and equal buildings. Don't need anything about land in that clause. You need land for a building, but you don't need expanses of open spaces. That's why it's not on there. But anyway, as far as what's currently going on, is many states have passed a transfer of public land resolution. That's how the grassroots is supposed to work, starting at county and state party levels. And we're going to have one in Wyoming that's going to be presented in next month's Republican National Committee meeting. And we're going to try to get the RNC to recognize the transfer of public lands And it's very well researched. Charles was a good witness.
Are you referring to Jennifer's resolution?
Marty's actually.
What? Okay. I think it was Jennifer Field, but that's the one we passed the state convention.
Yes, it's already on our state convention books. And other states have looked at or considering or passed. We need several states to band together in our instance, and the president's blessing.
Now that's the guy to get a hold of over there. And this is your state. Everybody needs to get behind that and figure out what it is, understand what it is, get educated on it, and then become actively engaged in watching that move forward. Yes, sir.
I guess also to help answer this question, everybody is really confused on these allotments. Everybody hears about allotments. Nobody knows what the hell they are. To try to make it kind of brief, when the Louisiana purchase took place, the government is not allowed to own land. The land was, once they got it settled, or got surveyed and got things done, they went ahead and opened it up to homesteading. Okay? There was things like Oklahoma with the Dust Bowl, all sorts of things where people just vacated the land. Now all of a sudden there was all this land out here that was no longer being homesteaded. It was vacant. That's when Congress came up with this idea of allotments. All the allotments was simply like homesteading again, but they realized that any country that does not take value of all of its natural resources is going to be in trouble. And they knew that farmers and ranchers were not doing timber. They weren't mining. They weren't doing some of these other things. They were busy ranching. So they set up these allotments, and you may have heard of the term called split estates. The split estate simply means that you have the split of grazing, you have the split of timber, you have the split of mining. When they sold the allotments, when they gave these allotments out, you as a rancher, you purchased that grazing allotment. By what Congress did, she owns that 12 months of the year, the grazing 100%, and the water that goes with it. The problem that has happened is that Congress no longer passes laws. What do? They sit there and do everything else. You have these bureaucrats that are passing these regulations. They are considering them law, the full effect of law. The only one that can pass laws in the United States of America is Congress, is the legislature, whether it be in the state or the federal level. These guys are doing whatever the hell they want. It is against the law. It is against what the allotments are. And you own that 12 months of the year, every single year. It is yours, and it is a deeded allotment, but it's for the grazing.
Yep, that's exactly right. And you heard LaBoy talking about that, about how BLM, Forest Service, Park Service, IRS, all of these 8 alphabet agencies are creating regulations in-house. And then they have the ability to enforce it as well. That is not how the founders intended this to be in this country. He certainly intended it for our elected officials to go to Washington and write and pass law. Yes, ma'am.
I kind of was keeping up with the story with Range Magazine.
Louder, please. You can't hear over here.
Oh, sorry.
Range. I'll repeat the question.
I was trying to keep up with what was going on with Range Magazine and Twister Radio reports and Brianna and her reports. So, number one, I congratulate you and thank you for doing what you're doing. Because if you don't stand up for it, you don't know what's going on. So the other thing is, did you get, in say Range Magazine, did you get good coverage, good accurate coverage?
Yes, CJ Hadley's great. Yes, she was great. She's a friend of the rancher and farmer and a friend of the American West. So did the Range Magazine cover it accurately? And my answer is yes. And I know the time is getting late, and I want to again thank you all for coming out and for watching the documentary episode 1. And I have my husband's book over here, if any of you haven't read it yet. I understand a lot of you have, and it was such a treat for me. For Ray brought me he met my husband back in 2015, before he was killed, when he was on tour with his book, because it had just been released. And tonight he brought me a signed copy. Those are very rare, and so I thank you. It's really a treasure to have that back. But again, thank you, and God bless.